Welcome everyone to the Redesigning School Counseling webinar for first year RSC schools. The focus of this webinar is expanding our school counseling resources, especially the resource of time, and then based on the number and amount of resources we have, establishing priority goals. My name is Sue Reynolds and I'm the president of the American Student Achievement Institute. Okay, so this is our agenda for this webinar. We'll be looking at this month's topic, which we just said. We'll do a meeting walkthrough. We're going to look at the submissions and the rubric guidance for those submissions, and then we'll also look at the online system. So this month we're talking about expanding our resources, especially time, and then narrowing down our goals into a few priority goals. So, before we have this month's meeting with your advisory council, and when we say this month, we actually have a 2-month period. We're not meeting again with you until February, so you have between the beginning of December and the beginning of February to get this meeting in. There are several things that we need to do prior to the meeting to help your council understand the resources that are there or not there. So, the first one is to calculate your actual time use. And so what we're doing here is we're going to use your time use logs, and we're going to add up all the little boxes for all of your counselors in those logs together. I think I did the math once. I think that there are close to 2,000 different 20-minute segments in a typical school year. So for each of your counselors, you're going to have 2,000 of those little boxes to look at. If you've been using the electronic version that we provide, those boxes are going to be added up weekly for you. So, so we're adding up all the boxes for all the counselors, and then the last thing we're doing in this section is adding up the total boxes. So if you have 4 school counselors, you're going to have about 8,000 total boxes. And then a portion of that in each of the different types of service. So after we know the total boxes, then we want to calculate the percentages. So we're going to take the total number of guidance boxes and then divide that by the total overall, the total overall boxes, and then multiply that by 100. And that will show you the percentage of time that your department, all of your counselors together, that your department is spending on guidance. And the same thing for the other 4 types of services. Last spring, when your students took the survey, there also was a counselor survey, and we asked you to guess at these percentages. So now we'll be able to have the data that we can actually go in and say, okay, based on our data, the percentages are these. So that's one thing we need you to do before the meeting, and it's a little time consuming because you're adding up boxes and boxes and boxes, but hopefully you use the electronic version of the time task, and that math is being done for you on a weekly basis. Okay, so that's one task. Then the other thing we need to do is to calculate the actual number of counselors that you have in your building. So we kind of view this a little differently. A school may think that they have 2 counselors, but if each of those counselors is spending half of their time doing things that have nothing to do with guidance and counseling, then what we really have is 2 half-time counselors. And so when we add that together, we have 1 counselor, not 2. So on paper we may have 2, but in reality, in practice, we really have just 1 counselor. So what we want to do is to adjust the full-time equivalency of your counselors. So here's how that would work. For each counselor, we're going to do this. We're going to add up and then take the number of non-program boxes for each counselor, and we're going to divide that by the total number of boxes for that counselor. Okay? So if we have, and then once we have this calculation, then we're going to subtract that from 1 and then multiply by 100. So here's an example. We're going to do that for each counselor. Here's an example for Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Jones is a full-time, on paper, a full-time counselor. She logged just over 2,000 boxes, 2,000 20-minute segments, and of those, 506 were non-program tasks. They had nothing to do with guidance and counseling. So I'm going to take this number and subtract it from 1. So when I do this math, do that division problem, I end up with 0.25. That's 25% of my time, or 0.25 of my time, is spent on non-program tasks. I subtract that from 1, and then that gives me the percentage of time that I am spending in program tasks. So on paper, Mrs. Jones is a full-time counselor. In reality, she is a 3/4 time counselor. She's 0.75 FTE. So we're going to do this for each counselor, and then we're going to add all the counselors together to be able to talk about, in reality, how many counselors we have in the building. So I think counselors are in a pretty unique position in a lot of schools where they've been hired to do one thing, but they're actually doing something totally different that has nothing to do with what they were hired to do. And we just want to be able to have that discussion mathematically. So we want to be able to say to people, you know, Mrs. Jones, we think is a, you know, everybody thinks she's a full-time counselor, but in reality, because of all the other stuff that she's doing that has nothing to do with guidance and counseling, she's really a 3/4 time counselor. And then also for your whole program, we think we have 4 counselors, but in reality, we only have 3.3 counselors, or whatever. Okay, so we need to do that, and then based on those 2 data points, we can calculate an accurate ratio. So when we calculate your student-to-counselor ratio, we want to make sure that we're using the counselor's adjusted FTE. So we want to take your total student enrollment and then the total FTE for your department, and that would give us our ratio. So for example, if I'm taking my 700 students to, on paper, 2 school counselors, that would give me 700 divided by 2 would give me 350 students per counselor. But when I use the adjusted FTE, which acknowledges that some of my counselors aren't spending all their time doing school counseling, and then dividing by 1.75 instead of 2, then that ratio ends up being 400 to 1, not the 350 to 1 before I adjusted. So this just kind of gives you an idea of, in reality, what the student-to-counselor ratio is. In my personal program, when I started doing this, my adjusted FTE was 10% of my time I was spending on the program. I was spending 90% of my time doing things that had nothing to do with school counseling. So on paper, my ratio, I forget, it was like 250 to 1. But when I did the adjustments, it was, you know, more like 2,000 to 1, because I was spending so little time with school counseling. Okay, so another thing that we need you to do is we view your reputation as a resource, and so we want to know, what is your reputation? Part of the survey that you gave asked kids what they thought of you. We asked them about your disposition. We asked them if you enjoy being a counselor, if you cared about kids. So we asked them questions about your disposition. We also asked them questions about your knowledge and your skills. And so that, we think, your reputation is the resource. For schools that have, with counselors that have good reputations, kids are likely to come in and talk with you and, feel welcome. On the other hand, if you don't have a reputation of caring about kids, your kids won't come in. So we think your reputation, or your kids' perception of you, is really important. We view that as a resource. Now, in a lot of schools that we've worked with, the reality of the counselor's disposition and attitudes was quite different than the kids' perceptions of their dispositions and attitudes. I can think of one Indiana school. It's one of the, I think, has one of the strongest school counseling programs in the state. Their counselors have gotten lots of recognition for doing programs that they're doing. I mean, it's really a top-notch program, really leading edge. But the first time they did RSC, when they did the survey, the students said, no, our school counselors don't care about us. No, they don't like their jobs. And I tell you, the counselors were really, really hurt. They were confused. They didn't know how to, what to do about that. So if that happens with you, which it may, one of the things I'd like you to think about is what the kids are saying. Is that reality? It's a good time to do a quick check. Do I care about kids? If the kids are saying that you don't. So it's a good reality check. But if you do that reality check and you think, I do care about kids, why are they saying I don't care about them? Then that's a good sign that you've got a perceptions issue. So in this really good school counseling program that I mentioned earlier, their counselors decided that there was definitely a perception problem, but they knew that in the kids' minds, it was reality. So they, in addition to doing their school counseling activities, they did a huge marketing campaign and really worked at branding themselves as caring people. And I might just mention, because this is something that really concerns me about the profession of school counseling, what those counselors decided, and I think that this is probably accurate, is they said, here's the deal. We talk all the time about how busy we are, about how overwhelmed we are, and about how unfair it is that we have all this extra non-program stuff to do. We're always talking about that. And they said that, we think what's happening is that kids are, picking up on those subtle messages that we're giving. And when they come in, they know we're busy and we're trying to hurry them through. And so they really worked at making every kid feel that they were the most important thing in the world and that there's nothing that they would, like to be doing but serving those kids. And over a couple of years, their reputation did change to be what it actually was, that they did care about kids. So just something to think about as you're looking at these results. It is okay if you look at these results and they are not based on reality. You do have a huge perception problem. I would say that it's okay to not share this report with your counselor when we get to that point. It's up to you. The school that I mentioned, they had a really good relationship with their counsel, and they brought that data to the council and said, we have a problem, we care about kids, but that's not our reputation. And, let's talk about what we need to do to fix that. On the other hand, if this could be a big political issue for you, you might want to think about working on the issue, but maybe not discussing it with your counsel right now. So at any rate, I just kind of wanted to toss that out. This is a kind of a scary report to look at to see what people think about you, but also a really good report because if it's not based on reality, then you've got an issue you need to change. Okay. So one other thing to look at is entering non-program activities in. During this meeting, when you start talking about the percentage of time that you're spending on non-program activities, somebody is going to say, well, what are you doing? And we want you to have the report of non-program activities ready to hand out so that if that comes up, you can say, well, I'll tell you, and then pass that report out so they can see all of the non-program tasks that you're doing. So I'll show you how to enter those when we get online and how to print that report. But we think you need to be ready with that report because in most cases, people will say, well, what are you doing? That's not a program. Okay, so let's do the walkthrough. Let's switch to a different PowerPoint. And here we go. Okay, so we're doing the welcome, and we're talking about the agenda. The first thing we're going to do with everybody is review, and then we're telling our council members that we're going to talk about expanding our guidance resources, and then we're going to go back to that list of goals that we came up with last month and develop a small list of priority goals. And it is okay for us to just have one priority goal if that's all the time and energy that we have time to address. And it's been recommended that we not have more than 3 priority goals because we're really going to focus hard on those issues. Okay, so we're reviewing the process. We're talking about the organizational structure real quickly. We're looking at people's, we're looking at the foundational beliefs behind RSC. You've heard this a gazillion times, so I'm just going to kind of fly through here. We're talking about the process and kind of reminding people that last month we talked about program goals and we came up with 50 or 60 or however many you have. And then this month we're going to say, okay, that's way too many to focus on all of them all at once. So this month we want to talk about how can we expand our resources, especially time, and then based on the number of resources we have, in reality, how many of those program goals can we really hit hard next year as priority goals? Our priority goals, if I were doing this, I would say, our priority goals I want you to hold me accountable for. We're really going to work our tails off to address those goals. We'll have baseline data and follow-up data, and I'm going to hold myself accountable for driving those student choices. That's what I'd like our program to be accountable for. So in other words, we're not being accountable for all 65, 70 of those program goals because we know we can't hit them all as hard as we need to impact every kid. But we can hold ourselves accountable for the subset of priority goals that we're really going to hit hard. Okay, so then coming up, we'll be talking about root causes. We'll be looking at are there social personal issues that are getting in the way? And if you had that come up in your last meeting about where's some social personal stuff, you can say, here's where that's going to come in because those social personal things are keeping kids from making those priority choices. And then we'll also look at student knowledge and opportunities that we give kids in this root cause section. So this is the whys. Why aren't kids making those choices? Then we'll talk in March about activities to address the whys. And that will be our last meeting with the council. And then after that, our counselors will get busy to prepare the program that we've designed. Okay, just a reminder to everybody that after each of these discussions, there are products that come out. Last month it was the program goals, and then today we're going to, when we leave here, we'll be ready to create the expansion plan, resource expansion plan, and then establish our priority goals. Okay, so again, our task today is to expand resources and set priority goals. So last month we came up with our program goals. Those were all the choices that we want kids to make in order to be successful in our school. This month we're going to say, okay, given the reality, how much time and energy we have, we know we can't tackle all those program goals in a big way. So we're going to do a subset of those program goals that we're going to call priority goals. Those priority goals we will hit extra hard next year to make sure that all of our students are choosing to make that choice. And then we're also going to monitor those priority goals with baseline data and follow-up data to see if kids are making the choices and if that's changing as a result of all of our programming. So priority goals, we may decide that we just have time to do one. That'll be part of today's discussion. It's been recommended again to us that we not have more than 3. Okay. So the main foundational understanding here is that time and resources limit the number of goals that we can identify as priority goals. So we're going to do 2 things. One is we're going to have a discussion about how can we expand resources, especially time. We're going to get more time. And then we're going to select a small number of program goals that will become our priority goals. So resource expansion plan These are all the different resources that we have that impact our ability to provide a sound program, especially that top one, time, and then the second one, the ratio. So we'll talk about each of these real quickly, and then we'll talk about a plan for expanding resources. So first of all, let's talk staff. This is our staff in our building. On paper, that second column is the full-time equivalency, so you can see what we have on paper. But the reality is that not all of our counselors are working as counselors 100% of the time. So we had to adjust the FTE to account for the percentage of time that counselors are doing non-school counseling things to give us our adjusted FTE. So, and then you'll fill in, of course, that chart. Okay, so now let's look at our ratio. We'll take the total number of students and calculate a ratio based on the adjusted FTE of all of our counselors, and that ends up being a ratio of 700 to 1 or 350 to 1 or whatever you come up with, and then you fill that in at the bottom of the page. So, and I maybe emphasize that a little bit, so that our school counselors are being asked to know on 752 students, to know their dreams and their career plans, and help them pick out classes, help them find scholarships, help them resolve social personal issues that are interfering with learning. That's a lot of students to have one counselor. In contrast, a mental health counselor in the community typically has a ratio of 20 to 1. And I always like to throw that out to kind of put it in perspective what we're asking school counselors. Okay, in terms of support staff, yes, we have a support staff position, or change it to no if we don't. Here are all the non-program tasks that are taking us away from providing school counseling. And I would emphasize, I always emphasize, these are good tasks. Somebody has to do them, but we just want to acknowledge that when school counselors are doing these tasks, we don't have time to be with kids and parents. So, and then this is the place where I would also pass out the list of all the non-program tasks that you're doing with the descriptions of each. So you've just written, substitute teaching, attendance, book rental, whatever all the things you're doing. Okay, in terms of time, we'd like to look at, before we talk about how we're actually using our time, we'd like to talk about how you would like us to spend our time. And this is incredibly important, because if you point out the reality before you get to this page, it really skews how people think. So we don't want to give any data into anybody yet. We're just going to say, how would you like us to spend our time? So what I would suggest you do is to ask people to get out a piece of scrap paper and just write down the words counseling, guidance, advocacy, management, and non-program, and then ask them to identify in their ideal school counseling program what percentage of your time they would suggest that you spend on each type of activity. And I'd give them a real quick redefinition of what those are. I usually make a joke in this point that the percentage of time cannot go over 100%, so it has to be within the reality of time. So, okay, so they've done that. Then the next part is really cool, I think. So these are Instagraphs that we're going to use with time percentages. And there's 5 of them. There's one for each type of activity. So what you've done is what you're going to do is give everybody 5 sticky dots, or give them a marker so they can make X's. And then they'll come up to each poster, and so they'll go up to the first poster, and this one says guidance on it, and on my little scrap paper it says 40% of the counselor's time should be spent on guidance activities. So what I do is I bring my little sticky dot, and I just go down here, find the 40%, and put my little sticky dot in there. And then the next person comes up, if they want 40%, they're going to put their sticky dot right above it. And then, so we're using an Instagram to build a bell curve again. It's really interesting to me that it always works out that the bell curves, the point of the bell curves are, usually it's easy to say to people, okay, the point of the guidance bell curve is 40%, let's go, would it be okay to go with that? And the counseling top is at, 15%, let's go with that. But it was always amazing to me that these percentages always add up to 100%, or they'll come very, very close. You might have to just, skew one or another point or two to get the percentages to add up to 100%, but it always works. The other thing is that my guess is that nobody's going to put a high percentage on non-program. So that's kind of cool. You're establishing that it's not just you saying you shouldn't be doing non-program tasks, but it's the community saying, our counselors should not be doing non-program tasks. It speaks very loudly, this activity. So, okay, so then after they've done that, and you've come to consensus then on the desired time use percentages from your counsel's perspective, then you're saying, okay, folks, let's see how close we came. So now you're going to the reality. I would, if I were doing this, I would just make I would just make, the small and say, okay, you just decided that your desired was 40, and then you've already got the reality in there, so we're not up to speed on that one. So this will kind of, then the light bulbs will start going off. We need to do something. If we want our counselors to spend 40% of our time with kids, and they're only spending 93 or 23% because they're spending 70 or 67% of their 67% of their time in non-program, this is such a great visual. Oh, if we decrease the non-program, we can get more time up here in the guidance. So this is where we're setting the stage for a really powerful conversation about your time use. Okay, so now we're moving on. We're saying, okay, let's look at some of the other resources. Here's our budget, total budget, and then total number of students, and then we're figuring out the per pupil expenditure. I think for most school counselors that we've worked with, the per pupil expenditure is between 50 cents and $1 per student, which of course doesn't purchase very much. And again, we're setting the stage. Some of your business members in your advisory council, they're thinking, oh my gosh, if I were to donate $500 for my business, which is nothing to me, that could double their budget. So again, we're kind of getting people to start thinking about how could we fix these things. Okay, networking is another resource, your network. So who do you meet on a regular basis with in school to network with? And again, you'll need to adjust the slides so it matches your reality. In the community, who do you meet with on a regular basis? So to create your community network. It may be that you never get out of the school and you never meet with anybody in the community, and you can just say, one of the things that happens when we don't have time is that we're not able to network with the community providers. So then we also want to acknowledge that there are some guidance in counseling and advocacy and management activities that are being provided by teachers. So you may have third grade teachers that are doing lessons on career development. So you could say in this section of guidance, that there's, the teachers are providing career guidance because they're instructing, they're teaching about careers. In counseling, if you have a teacher advisory program or a teacher mentoring program, you could put that in there that teachers are providing that service. So at any rate, so we're just trying to look at and introduce the idea that these activities don't have to be implemented by just counselors. We can all be getting engaged in this. And then same thing with community members. Who in the community is providing guidance or counseling for your kids? And then we just kind of get that logged in. Again, we feel this is a resource for your program. Professional development review is the resource. There are a ton of school counselors that are never able to get out of the building to participate in professional development. It's another area that really concerns me. And if this is the case with you, I think your counsel will start to say, well, why not? And they say, well, we just can't afford it. And then again, maybe somebody will say, well, we'll sponsor you to go to that event. Or, or you might be saying, well, our administrators just don't, allow anybody to go to the building for professional development. And, this professional development is really important, and your community, I think, will start to speak up in this area too. Okay, additional resources space. This tends to be the kind of things that a sound school counseling program provides. Technology, and again, you'll need to edit each of these slides. Other materials that you have that you're able to provide, supplies, and then finally the perception of the school counselors. So, and this is, again, if this is too political for you to discuss, you can just leave this out. But if you have a really good relationship with your counsel and you feel that they're going to be supportive and help you think about these things, then I would definitely leave this in, because they're going to have great ideas. Okay, so now we've talked about all the different resources. Now we want to prioritize how we're going to expand these resources. So this Instagraph, another little Instagraph, we've listed all the different types of resources out here, and we've given you spots to add in additional resources that maybe aren't in the top 10 that we put down there. And then we're just telling people however many items you have here, we're going to divide it by 3. That's how many votes people get. So if it stays with just these 10 items, 10 divided by 3 is 3 point something, so I give people 3 votes. And then they come up and they say, okay, which are the resources that we think we need to impact? And my guess is that if your school is typical, it's going to be time. That's going to be the big one. Maybe budget, maybe staff, but time usually is the one that gets the most votes. So on this one, you'll see this Instagraph build. We're going to build this Instagraph off to the side, and then that will tell you what area that you want to work on. So, and I can almost guarantee you it's going to be time, but maybe not. Okay, so on the next slide then, we're going to create a resource expansion plan. So this is this is the page that's in the manual that you can blow up into a poster. And at the top, I would have already written in your current time use, and then the desired time use you just established at the meeting, so you can drop those into there. And then just list the resources. The top one probably off the Instagraph is going to be time. Is this something that you're going to work on changing next year? Yes. And then what's the plan? What's everybody going to do? And this is where I like to say to folks, the reality is we're not going to have additional income. We've got to get creative about this. What can we all do? Let's look at this list of non-program tasks. Are there things that you guys could volunteer to do that would free up the counselors to do some of your other things? Anyway, so we come up with the action plan, and then a target resource level that we want to get our non-program activities down to 10%, or we want to bring in $2,000 or whatever that is. There may be some resources that came up high on the list, like new staff, that is high on the list, but are you going to change it next year? No, because there's just no funding available for new staff. I should tell you, though, that every year we have a couple of schools that after this discussion they end up hiring another counselor or another support staff, or we've also had a lot of situations where when it came to roofing a counselor, after this discussion, the advisory council became huge advocates for keeping the counselors. So at any rate, so it's a really good discussion. Okay, so then the second part of the meeting is after we know how we're going to expand our resources, then we want to come down and look at the reality of the goals. So we're going to create a subset of all of your goals that are going to become the priority goals. So here's the givens. We know that we have identified a lot of choices for students, and that kids must make a lot of choices in order to be successful in school and to prepare for post-secondary. We know that some students are making choices at a greater rate than others. Let me reword that our students are making some choices at a greater rate than other choices. And the reality is that we have limited resources, although now we have expanded those resources. So the question is, which 1 to 3 student choices are the most important to us because the choice is important and because there are fewer students making that choice? Those will become our priority choices that we're going to put extra time and energy into next year. So, the first step of this discussion is then to remind everybody that they've already looked at the list of all the choices. We did that last month, and they put stars next to the choices that not many students were making that they were worried about. So we're going to come to that list with the stars on it that they're going to bring back from the last meeting. And then we're just going to say, given the degree to which our students are already making sound choices and given the amount of time and other resources available, number 1, how many priority choices should we tackle, and which goal should be our priority? This sometimes is a hard discussion because your heart wants to fix every problem for kids, every issue, but you got to stay in the reality of what you have the time and energy to do. So I would really encourage you not to let your council go more than 3 priority choices, and just tell them, we can hit all those other goals too, but we just really want to hit a couple of things really hard and really make an impact in those areas. So, okay, so you're deciding, okay, how many are we going to add in? And then we want to establish a data target for those goals. So what's the student group? What's the choice that we want those kids to make? What is the current percentage of kids making that choice? And then what is the target percentage? So here's just some examples. Here's some elementary examples. Student group is kindergartners. We want the choices. We want them to have fewer than 10 absences per year. Our current data is 87%, and our target data is 95%. So there's elementary examples. Middle school example, we want our 7th graders to choose to take a career interest inventory. Our current data is 20%, and we want that one to be 100%. We want every kid in the building to do it. We want to nail it next year so that can happen. So we're setting that target. And some high school examples, we want our free and reduced lunch seniors to submit a FAFSA. The current data is 32%, and we want to increase that to 65%. Notice that the student group is not all students now, it's just a subgroup, or a group within the seniors. And just a kind of aside, my personal opinion is that every student should submit a FAFSA, not just the free and reduced lunch kids, but you've got that as a possible student group. Okay. So, some tips. You want to make the data targets challenging because you want to feel like you've accomplished something when you meet that target. But you also want it to be reachable by the end of next school year. I know for me personally, I would hold myself accountable for making sure that kids are making those choices. So, for example, if we're saying that we want 100% of the freshmen to have a 4-year high school course plan, that's our target, then I'd hold myself accountable for that, and I'd say, okay, what do I have to do to make that happen? It's also why we only want there to be 1 to 3 data targets, because we want you to feel priority data targets, because we want you to feel comfortable going after those targets. Okay, and then also remember that lots of people can implement activities to help you reach your targets. Not only you, but teachers, parents, community organizations. And down the road, we're going to talk with community organizations that are represented on your council about what they could do to help drive some of your choices. Okay, so this is just a template for you to fill in on the spot. So you're saying, okay, our group is 3rd graders. The choice we want them to make is to ask questions in class. We do a quick data study where we ask teachers to identify how many students asked a question in class on that specific day. That can be our current data, and then our target data is wherever you set the target. It could also be the survey data for your current data. You could say, okay, on the survey, 80% of the kids said they asked questions in class, and that could be your data. Okay. So before we close this meeting, this is really important. We want to make sure we do a capacity check. Given the resources available, including time, do we have the capacity for implementing activities that will address each of our priority goals in an effective way so we can reach our targets? So if you're starting to feel tense because we're overextending you, then this is the place where you have to speak up. Because if you don't speak up here, people are going to be holding you accountable for things that you can't deliver. So this would be the time to say, you have 15 priority goals there, and I'm spending 80% of my time on non-program tasks. This isn't going to work. So let's go back and make some adjustments. So it's very important that you feel comfortable at this point. So let's say you don't feel comfortable, then what has to happen? Well, you could say, I'm with you. I want to do those 15 priority goals. Let's go back to the non-program tasks and see what else we can get rid of so I can have the time to do those things. So that's one option. Or maybe that you need something like funding. Maybe one of the priority goals is that all kids do a campus visit, but you don't have money for the bus and the driver and all that. So, let's talk about that resource and funding. I'm going to need that, and we're going to keep that one in. The other thing you could do is you could say, there's just no way with that time. Let's look at getting rid of 12 of those 15 priority goals, and let's get it down to 3 because that's manageable. So it's important at this point to have a very honest discussion about your ability to deliver. And I think, though, at this time, people will understand where your heart is and that you're working hard, and they also want you to work within capacity. So sometimes it takes a little bit of courage to kind of speak up and say, I can't do that, that's not realistic. But you just got to have that courage when people will be having expectations of you that you can't reach. Okay, looking ahead, in going into the next meeting, we want people to know that there's going to be a pre-meeting activity where they will look at data. They'll get an email with some links in it that will be links to data that will help them understand why kids aren't making those choices. And they're going to need to fill out some sticky notes and then bring those sticky notes back to the next meeting. So what we suggest to you is that you send everybody home with a stack of 20 to 30 sticky notes and just let them know, keep those sticky notes because you're going to be getting an email from us before the next meeting that will ask you to pour through some data and then write some stuff in the sticky notes. Sticky notes are going to look like this when they're completed. Don't worry about it now. Just kind of a heads up, though, this is what we're doing. And then you'll bring those back for the next meeting. Okay, and then looking ahead, the meeting after that, we'll be talking about activities, and thank you very much for coming. Okay, very fast. I know I'm approaching the end of our time. I make it over just a little bit. I apologize, especially since it's the end of the day. But let's go to the process tab. Okay, and I'm going to scroll down to December, January. Okay. So, webcast is what we're recording now. That will be here. Upload counts or time use logs. This is just the uploader button where you click that and then you click this button to choose the time use logs that you've been filling out all year, and then you just hit the upload and it'll upload those. Now, one word of caution there. The system will only let you allow you to upload one document. However, that document's going to have several pages because the requirement is that you submit 2 time task logs for each of your counselors, one from fall semester, one from spring semester. So that's why we had you filling them out last spring and then this current fall. So if you have 4 counselors, that's going to give you 8 pieces of paper. The system will only allow you to upload 1 document. So what you'll need to do is to scan all 8 pieces of paper into 1 PDF and then upload that PDF. Okay, on the next line is where we want you to edit your counselor time uses. If you click on this brings you up to the counselor survey that you did last spring. And at that point, these percentages were based on your hunches of how you were spending your time. And when you open this up, probably this no is going to be checked, and there will be time percentages in here. So now that we have data, we want to say yes, this is based on a time use log, and then put your percentage in there. Okay, so that's that. Let's see. Enter non-program tasks. It's very simple. You're going to click on the Enter button, and then here you're going to go to the Enter row, click Enter, and you're entering in the activity title, parental, whatever you're doing, description, in the fall, blah, blah, blah. Then, watch what happens when I click Activity Type. The rest of this is describing a school counseling activity, associating that activity with goals and indicators and all that. But as soon as I say that the activity type is a non-program, then all of that becomes dead. So non-program activities are not associated with the program goal because they have nothing to do with school counseling. So we do want you to say the months when these activities happen and then who's doing them. In my situation, we had one counselor that did a ton more non-program than other counselors, and this kind of exposed that. So, okay. So that's very easy. And then after all those things are in, whoops, I go back anymore. After all those things are in, then I can print a report, and that just shows me all the non-program tasks, and then a little description of each of them. Okay. Actually, I don't know if that was a non-program task. That might have been mislabeled. Okay. Then the resource action plan. That is also in a Word document that you'll fill out, and then you'll upload that. I'll skip a step. Here's conducting the meeting. That will take you to the manual part this will take you to the manual part where you can download all the PowerPoint and all of that. Resource action plan, you can download that from the manual here and then upload it after it's completed. And then on the priority goals, notice that this when you go in, there will not be this red message here. So when you go in, you'll click on Enter. And we've tried to make this very simple for you. So what you'll do is if you want to review your program goals before you start, you can look at that report. But then you're going to select your priority goals. So when you enter, you'll get all of your priority goals. When you go in, none of them will be checked. So these are the priority goals that you put in last month. And then you'll just say, oh, I'm sorry, these are all of the goals that you put in last month. And then you're just going to click priority, the ones that are priority. And I'm just going to have one priority goal. So discuss future plans with your school counselor. I'm going to hit save. And that then tells me that that is my priority goal. Okay, now there's a two-step process for putting the goals in. We put the priority goal in. Now we need to put in the priority goal data. This is going to take me just a couple minutes to discuss. It's really important. I want to make sure that you know how to do this, and then we'll be pretty much finished. So the priority goal data, I'm going to click enter, and my priority goal pops up, discuss the future plans with the school counselor. And then the other thing that pops up is if this were a goal that came from, that was aligned with the survey data is going to pop up. So you will only have one set of data in here, probably it's just going to be 2014 data, but over the years, when you give that survey year after year, you'll be able to have some longitudinal data to look at that. So you can see that over the years, this hasn't changed. It's been about 50% the whole time. Now it's going to be a priority goal. We're going to figure out a way to make that happen for all kids. So, so what I would do is I just would put in my target goal year, which for you guys to be 2015. And actually, there will be a row of 2014 here for you. Demo School didn't give the survey in 2014, but you did, so you'll have 2014. So I'm going to say this data is going to come from the spring of 2015. And then if I'm going to do this with every student in the building, because that's my big push this year, I can change that to 100%, or I think there might be a few that you miss, 99%. Yeah, I'm going to put it at 100%. And then you're going to save. Now, that red flag that we saw a couple minutes ago, that was because you got that flag because I had not yet saved the target. So I'm going to save this now. And very good, that is now saved. And I'll put a message up here that's saved. When I go back to that original, computer's being slow. Here we go. A couple more. Oops, then we have to refresh this. There we go. So you can see the red flag disappeared because now I have a target associated with that goal. And then I can look at a report for the priority goals, and that is showing me, here's what I'm doing. Here's my program. Here's my priority goal. Here's what I'm going to count. Here's the data right now. Here's my target down here, and then here's the date. Okay, so I think that's about it. Minutes works just the same. Let's look at the rubric items. We're blaming this on Cyber Monday, but it's the day after Cyber Monday. It's awful slow. The rubric items basically are just that the tasks